Why are fathers more prone to leave their kids than mothers?
I think just in the natural order of things, if you look at the whole animal kingdom, you will see mothers are basically the caregivers in the natural realm, but we as a species supposed to be more intelligent and the dominant of all creatures on the earth, but the propensity for men to leave has a lot to do with their level of feeling responsible and taking responsibility. The other side of it is that it's just natural. The mother has spent 9 months carrying and feeling the connection of this child growing inside of him, and if the father of the child does not have that same connection that's made not through the intimate connection of bearing the child, but just knowing that this is my legacy, this is my future, and I want to have a part in my beliefs, my hopes for the future being carried forward in the offspring that I help produce. Then I don't think there's anything that will keep a man bound to an offspring unless that is fundamentally a part of who he is, that he really cares and want to see his future lived out through the legacy of his child or offsprings.
Okay. What examples can be made of children excelling despite the absence of the father?
I believe, and this is where I have to express my faith, I believe that the Lord always put in place a provision for all humanity, and one of those things is that a child will see an example in a person, whether it is a teacher, a close relative, an uncle, an aunt, a grandmother, somebody that inspires them to be their best, and that inspiration comes in the form of trying to have what I've missed, and they work really hard at filling their own gaps, and I've seen that story replayed so many times. As a matter of fact, before this interview, I got off the phone with a pastor friend of mine whose mother was left with 10 children, and he's not a bitter person. He's loving, forgiving. So I believe that really personifies the example of the Lord putting someone in our lives that will fill the gap.
Are there any instances where a father attempts to re-enter the child's life?
Yes, as a matter of fact, if I can go back to the same reference, after getting old and needy, this pastor's father is re-entered in his life, and he needs someone to look out for him. But this young man, having the spirit of God in him, holds no grudges, and willing to extend himself to be a caregiver to his dad in the late stages of his life. I think he told me he's more than 80 years old. And then there are other examples I know personally where men who saw some success in their children's life tried to come back and pretty much take advantage of their generosity and want to be a dad at a stage in their life where it's too late. They don't need a dad anymore. They're mature and taking care of their own families. And that is just a reminder of the hurt they suffered when someone wants to come back and be, there's no kind way to say it, a leech. But then there are other examples of men who have had a change of heart. Maybe they have met the Lord somewhere in the course of their life and want to restore a relationship and ask for forgiveness and be a father maybe to his own grandchildren, the type of father he couldn't be for his children. So the spirit of forgiveness is one that bridge a lot of gaps in life if we are willing to allow that to govern who we are and what we can become, because that's ultimately what we need to have a relationship with God. It begins with forgiveness, and we need to extend that same forgiveness to people in our lives, no matter what they've done to us. And that is the true mark of a person who has a relationship with the Lord, when they can forgive.
That's right. How should children cope with living without a father?
I think that when the family, as a total unit, when in the natural order of things that God has ordained for humanity, we are a self-contained unit in ourselves, meaning that in a traditional family, particularly the ones that are exemplified in the Bible, there was a hierarchical system of a patriarch and a matriarch, and usually there were two grandparents, four grandparents, two parents, and all of this support where there is enough wisdom to be passed along, love, support, protection, all those things that we all look for in the natural experience of life. It's unfortunate that because the devil has, and it doesn't work in that fashion, but attack the family. And a child should have a great support mechanism just from his own kid, from grandparents, four grandparents, kinsmen, in a child life, to extend those basic things that we talked about: love, wisdom, compassion, protection, provision. So that's a powerful thing when it works correctly.
Okay. Tell me a little about your father, you and your father growing up, you all's relationship.
My dad had 12 children. I was the last of 12. 10 survived. 9 survived. 3 died really early. But being the last of 12, my father spent most of my young life working 2 jobs to provide for us. And I knew he loved me because in the environment where I grew up, there were a lot of absentee dads. And that was enough to paint a very, very clear picture to me that he loved me, because we didn't have everything we wanted, but he struggled to provide what we needed. And that first, his presence. Secondly, we were few of the families in the community that I knew for a fact had meat on the table at every meal. We didn't have a lot of new clothes, but we were never raggedy. Our mother made sure that we were clean and our clothes were pressed and we looked presentable. So I know that he was providing for us, and not until most of my siblings were adults away at college or in the military or something like that, I had the privilege of growing really close to my dad, because he had, through some health issues, had retired from work, and we were able to connect in ways that maybe some of my peers didn't have an opportunity to benefit from, because he was always working. But we had an interest in baseball and sports together, and those were some things that I can reflect back on right now and sit down and remember watching baseball players from the 60s and 70s that he really admired, and told me a lot about their professional careers. So just making a connection somewhere, finding common ground, and we had it, and I appreciate all that he did to provide for us. And I thank him so much for staying there when the challenges were hard, and he could have been like so many other men in that era, walked away because it was easy.
Right. So your father had a lot to do with your fathering techniques.
Absolutely. I think example always shape our thinking, our personalities, and I know I had a good example.
Now, a lot of people say that fathers, the younger generation of fathers, make it seem as if that's when the bad parenting has started, where they don't know how to be fathers because they didn't have fathers. So even back in the early 60s, you saw a lot of households without fathers. It's been going on for years. It's not something that has just started.
Well, now I have to speak from the black perspective. The one of the effective tools of slavery was disenfranchising the family. So men were not always a part of the family structure anyway. So that became so much of a common sight in the black community of a woman raising her family on her own. But the exception to the rule was when men that were present and would, stay there and tough it through the challenges of a segregated society that I grew up in, and would endure the humiliation and all the other things that came with that type of society back in the 50s and 60s. So my dad's example to me is one that I cherish and try in any opportunity that I have in speaking with young men to help them. We'll re-record this.